My girlfriend at the time and I went camping 5 hours away from home for her birthday, our anniversary. We made the trip the day after a big storm passed through. We left town early and got there in the early afternoon. The guy at the entrance to the campgrounds mentioned there was no one else staying there that weekend. We were like, oh, this is going to be sick. First, we drove down these long pathways to our designated area. As you got closer to it, the road narrowed. So basically, you had to back out to get out. We unloaded the car, got the tent set up, and decided to go walk around the woods. It was dead silent, but it was still bright out, so we just took in all the nature we could and walked a few miles away. We reached this point in the woods where there were some weird-looking white cabins. They were very uniform, all built the exact same way. Like, I guess they were a part of the camping grounds, but they seemed way out of the way, and there was no sign of life. It felt eerie to be at, like we shouldn't be there. So we turned around and walked back. We took a breather in the tent, then tried to start a fire in the fire pit. Unfortunately, neither of us had ever been camping before and had no idea how to start a fire. We had bought some of those self-lighting logs from Walmart and some lighter fluid, but everything else around us was soaked to the bone from the rain that had passed through the day before. We knew we needed kindling of some sort, but any dry sticks or leaves was far and few between. Eventually, we got a small fire going and ate hot dogs and marshmallows and spent some time looking at the stars. Then we noticed just how dark it was out there. My girlfriend was easily spooked and was like, "Can we get into the tent now?" So we put the fire out and crawled into the tent. We were talking to each other, but I could tell she was tense. Suddenly, she put her hand over my mouth and was like, "Shh, do you hear that?" Before I could respond, we heard footsteps, like heavy footsteps. It sounded like a group of people walking. I whispered to her, "It's probably just animals or something." Then we heard mumbling, like low mumbling. We couldn't make out words, but it didn't sound like a sound an animal could make. It sounded like words, but hushed and non-elaborated. We sat in silence, staring at each other in the dark for what felt like forever. The mumbling got louder, as did the footsteps, until it sounded like it was right outside of our tent. We both froze. I don't think either of us were breathing. And then, silence. We waited and waited and waited. I'm still not sure how much time passed. Eventually, my girlfriend said, "We have to get to your car." The adrenaline was pumping, so I peeked out of the tent into the darkness and told her to stay behind me. Then we ran to the car. I locked the doors and she was like, "What the fuck was that? We can't stay here. No one is out here but us. What was that?" I kept looking around for any signs of life, but we were seemingly alone. I looked at her and was like, "Okay, I'm gonna grab our stuff. You stay in the car." We only had our ice chest and our tent out. I hopped out and ran, grabbed our ice chest, tossed it into the back seat. As I turned around to go get the tent, I started hearing footsteps closing in again. In a moment of pure terror, I yanked the tent out of the ground, wrapped the tarp around it, and slung it over my shoulder like some panicked Santa Claus and shoved it into the trunk. I didn't say anything when I got in the car except, "Do we have everything in here?" My girlfriend said yes, and I floored it in reverse out of our camping area. Then we came to a fork in the road that went in like 6 different directions. I asked my girlfriend if she remembered which path we came down to get in here, and she told me she didn't know. We chose a random one and ended up in a different camping spot. I cursed under my breath and slammed it into reverse again. Then I noticed from the angle we had exited from, I could see the main path back to the gate, thanks to a small sign behind an overgrown bush. As we hightailed it out of there, I noticed there was a single small green light out in the woods to our right, near where our designated spot was. We drove the entire 5 hours back to our hometown and fell asleep on my girlfriend's parents' couch at around 4 a.m. We never talked about the trip ever again, and I haven't had any desire to camp since LOL. I don't know how to start this off, but it pretty much starts back when my dad died back in 2021. We used to own this property down in a small little town in West Virginia. I go down there for many reasons: deer hunting, fishing, and riding. I went down there to visit my dad's ashes because that's where he wanted to be cremated and set by the fire. I went to talk to his ashes, and instantly I felt something off. I felt like I was being watched, and I've never felt this fear before because I'm a very strong person that could lift very heavy weights. Therefore, I just never got scared of many things because I knew I had the strength advantage. Nothing too bad happened until later this night around 8 p.m. to get tucked in bed and leave around 1 p.m. the next day. I wake up to a tapping noise on the window on the somewhat screen door. From what it seemed, it looked like my dad's vase of ashes with his picture on it, and someone was playing some unfunny puppet play joke on me. To think they were funny, I opened the door after looking through the foggy window to see absolutely nothing. Later that night, I went to bed after checking around. Keep in mind that I'm all by myself around 12 a.m. I see that stupid same puppet play-like show though, the blurry window. But this time when I went up to the window, my dad's vase of ashes had a voice saying, "It's me, son, your dad," only to see the vase sink to where I can't see it through the window. Because it got too low to see it, only to see a big black head with white eyes and a smile showing all its teeth. It had very bad teeth, about 2 feet wide and 2 feet tall. Head, I knew this thing was tall and was after me. I went out there to let it know who it or he or she was messing with, only for me to walk out and see a 20 to 30 foot tall-sized veiny creature. I instantly went back inside, locked the door, and called my friend to come to my exact location. It was going to take him about 3 hours, including stops like gas and red lights. The monster stayed there all night through morning, tapping, saying my name and telling me it's my dad. After my friend arrived, the monster was gone. We were able to pack up and leave around 5 a.m. We stopped at a small restaurant local to the town. I hear this 63-year-old woman and 70-year-old man talking about this same monster, and it haunted them too, so I guess I wasn't the only one. It's 2024 now, and for 3 years, I haven't stepped foot in that town, and that creature still haunts me, and I still get nightmares about it. My girlfriend wants to go down there to see this place for the view, and I keep denying her to go. The first night, the teddy bears are waiting in the woods. As it got dark, my uncle said he had a scary story to tell. He lifted his flashlight to his face, and in the flickering glow, his features twisted into something eerie. Then, he started scratching the trees with his nails, making a sound like claws dragging across bark. His voice turned low and slow, filled with something unsettling, as he began to sing. If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go down to the woods today, you'd better go in disguise. For every bear that ever there was will gather there for certain. Because today's the day the teddy bears have their picnic. A chill crawled up my spine. The forest around us was pitch black, except for the flickering light of the campfire throwing twisted shadows onto the trees. Deep down, I knew it was just a children's song, but the way my uncle sang it, it felt like something forbidden, something you weren't supposed to say in the woods at night. He suddenly dragged his nails through the air, like something invisible was there, then stopped, his voice dropping into a growl. I nearly fell off the log, and everyone laughed. But the worst part wasn't the story. It was what happened when I tried to sleep. The midnight terror. Something was outside our tent. I couldn't sleep. The darkness outside felt too thick, too silent. And yet I heard it. A snap. Soft footsteps. Something scratching against the tent fabric. I froze, holding my breath. My uncle's voice echoed in my head. If you go down to the woods today, you'd better go in disguise. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe an animal. But every time I closed my eyes, I imagined huge black claws parting the tent fabric, glowing eyes peering in. Then, my mom screamed. I jumped so hard I nearly tumbled off my sleeping bag. My dad shot upright, grabbing a hunting knife. He ripped open the tent zipper and peered outside. "What happened?" he shouted. "Bats," my mom yelled. "Just bats, flapping near the fire." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else had been moving outside. When my dad zipped the tent back up, I flinched. For a split second, I was convinced it wasn't really him. The next nights, it kept happening. The following nights, my uncle sang the song again, and something walked around our tent. One night, I finally gathered the courage to lift the edge of the tent flap and peek outside. I saw a shadow moving between the trees. It wasn't a bear. It stood too still. It felt like it was watching us. I prayed that my dad wouldn't fall asleep, that the flashlight wouldn't die. I wanted to go home. Years later, what was it? As I grew up, I knew my uncle was just messing with me, but I never forgot that night. When I turned 12, I finally stopped being afraid of camping. But every time I hear that song, I remember something scratching against my tent in the middle of the night. When I was 8, I stayed at my uncle's house. Before bed, he sang the song again, laughing. I was sleeping alone in his dark basement. That night, I heard the same sounds. Scratching. Footsteps. Then, something whispered near my ear. If you go down to the woods today, you'd better go in disguise. But my uncle was already asleep, and there was no one else in the house.